When I moved back to Sweetwater Ridge, I didn't come for the house. I came for my mother. My name is Rhea Whitmore. I'm 36 years old, a civil engineer by trade, and a builder by instinct. For the past 12 years, I've managed construction crews across the Southwest, designing roadways, flood systems, and housing projects from Santa Fe to El Paso. I've worked in desert-survived tornado seasons and pulled 18-hour shifts laying rebar. I've always been practical, focused, self-reliant, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for coming home. The farmhouse was the same as I remembered, stoic, sun-washed, and a little crooked, like it had been leaning into the wind for years. It sat on 4 acres of overgrown grass and stubborn clay soil, a patchwork of forgotten fence posts and grapevines that had long since given up producing anything edible. A green mailbox, rusted at the hinges, still bore the name Whitmore in peeling paint. I stood at the end of the graveled driveway, the late summer heat clinging to my skin suitcase in one hand and toolbox in the other. My shoulders ached, not just from the red-eye flight or the 12 years I'd spent working construction sites, but from the weight of knowing everything was about to change. Inside, the air smelled like lemon balm and dust. The wooden floors groaned in welcome. 1,000 memories came flooding back. I was 8 again, barefoot on those boards chasing fireflies. 13, crying in the pantry after my father left. 22, dragging my final box to college, not looking back. And now, back again, not for work, not for vacation, but because the only woman who'd ever held this place together needed someone to hold her. "Is that you, baby?" Her voice floated from the back bedroom. Thin, worn, familiar. "Yeah, Mama, it's me." She smiled when I appeared in the doorway, her cheeks sunken but her eyes bright with recognition. She was propped up on her pillows, blankets bunched around her knees, the same lace curtain fluttering behind her like it had my whole life. She looked smaller than I remembered, fainter, but still there. "You cut your hair." I laughed softly. "It's too hot for ponytails in August." "Well, you look strong. Thinner, but strong." It had been almost 2 years since I last saw her in person. Phone calls, video chats, cards, promises. "I'll visit soon. Just one more project. Maybe next spring." But then came the diagnosis, congestive heart failure, stage 3, and a voicemail from Logan, our middle brother, saying, "If you can come, Rhea, now's the time." So I came. The first week was a whirlwind of doctor visits, pill bottles, freezer meals, and figuring out which part of the house would fall apart next. The septic backed up on day 3. The back porch steps crumbled under my boot on day 5. A raccoon moved into the attic by the weekend. Still, there was a peace in it. I woke up with the sun, helped her dress, brewed the same chicory coffee she'd always loved, and made a point of sitting down beside her every evening to talk. Sometimes she'd recount old stories, how she and Daddy had bought the house for $39,000 in 1984, how I used to sketch treehouses in the margins of my math books, how Grant had once tried to sell his Little League trophy to buy a Game Boy. We laughed, we cried, we sat in silence. One night, as I rubbed lavender oil on her hands, she whispered, "They're going to come for it, you know." I paused. "Come for what, this house?" "When I'm gone." I looked up at her. They wouldn't. She met my eyes. Steady, sad. Grant's got his eye on the land. Logan's deep in debt. They see this place as equity. You see it as home. I swallowed. She wasn't wrong. She reached toward the nightstand and pulled open the drawer. Inside, a folded envelope yellowing at the edges. "This isn't official, but it's something." I had Marlene notarize it last fall. I wrote down what I want. I opened it. A single page, handwritten. Simple words: "To whom it may concern, I, Eleanor Whitmore, hereby give full decision-making rights regarding the property at 57 Harlan Way to my daughter, Rhea Whitmore, as she has cared for me and maintained the home. It is my wish that she inherit the property in full." At the bottom, her signature, date, and the unmistakable red seal of Marlene, our town's notary and Sunday school teacher. I couldn't afford to redo the will, Mama said. Voice, raspy. Lawyers cost more than my prescriptions. "It's okay," I said, tucking the letter into my bag. "Thank you for trusting me. You earned it." Grant called the next morning. "How's the patient?" he asked in that breezy tone he used when he wanted something. "She's stable, resting a lot. Good, good. Hey, while you're there, mind getting the property appraised just for reference?" My stomach turned. "Why, no reason. You know, in case we decide to downsize after." "She's not even gone yet, Grant." There was a pause. "That's not what I meant." "Right." I hung up. Didn't answer the next 5 calls. Logan texted that week too, a casual mom doing okay. "Heard the porch is caving in. Should probably replace it." No offer to help. No mention of coming home. Just advice from 900 miles away. But I didn't wait for them. I pulled permits. I bought lumber. I started working. By September, I'd replaced the porch, patched the roof, and cleared the backyard. Mama would watch from the kitchen window as I hauled wheelbarrows and drilled joists, her face glowing with pride. "You always did like building," she said one morning. "Didn't have much of a doll phase. You remember that pine tree you tried to turn into a fortress when you were 10? I smiled, still mad you wouldn't let me use the staple gun. She chuckled, then turned serious. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let them turn this place into a short-term rental. It's not just wood and nails. It's where your granddaddy died, where I raised you, where you came back." I nodded. "I promise." By October, she was weaker. She needed oxygen. Then the hospital bed. Then hospice. I was sitting with her one evening, brushing her hair, when she said, barely above a whisper, "If you ever lose that paper, check the wall." What wall? But she didn't answer. She had drifted to sleep. I didn't press. Not then. The frost came early that year. I sealed the windows, stacked firewood. She passed away the night before Thanksgiving, holding my hand, looking out the window at the stars. Grant and Logan flew in for the funeral. Black suits, somber faces, quick hugs. "I think we should talk about the house," Grant said, before we even reached the reception. I didn't respond, because in that moment I already knew. The battle hadn't started yet, but it was coming, and I was ready. The day after the funeral, the house was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the heavy, suspended kind. The kind that settles in when someone's absence has weight. The hospice bed was gone, the oxygen tank too, just a square indent in the carpet and a faded quilt still folded at the foot of the couch. I moved through the house like I was haunting it, not living in it. Every corner whispered something. Her teacup, still on the drying rack, her garden boots under the bench. The scent of eucalyptus still clinging to the pillow on the porch swing where she'd nap on warm days. I wasn't ready to pack any of it away, so instead I baked cornbread. I played her favorite Emmylou Harris record. And I sat down at the kitchen table, the one she'd refused to replace for 40 years, and stared out the window as clouds gathered low over the ridge. That's when I remembered the letter. The one she'd pulled from the drawer that night, hands trembling, eyes tired but clear. I stood slowly and crossed to the old built-in hutch beside the fridge. The drawer stuck like always. It groaned in protest before sliding open. And there it was, a cream-colored envelope, my name written in her curling script across the front. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Handwritten, signed, notarized, "To whom it may concern. I, Eleanor Whitmore, hereby give full decision-making rights regarding the property at 57 Harlan Way to my daughter, Rhea Whitmore, as she has cared for me and maintained the home. It is my wish that she inherit the property in full." At the bottom, her signature, the date, and the red ink stamp of Marlene DeWitt, our town's longtime notary public, also the church treasurer, and a woman who'd once babysat me and my brothers when Mama had jury duty. I sat back the paper, trembling in my hands. It wasn't a formal will, but it was something. Proof that she'd meant what she said. She didn't want this house chopped up. She didn't want a cash out or equal liquidation or any of those cold legal terms my oldest brother liked to toss around. She wanted it to stay, whole, grounded, rooted. With me. The next morning, I drove into town. Sweetwater Ridge hadn't changed much. The same faded diner sign with the flickering O and open, the same post office boxes with peeling numbers, the same quiet rhythm of a town that had never needed to be anything other than itself. Marlene's notary office sat next to the bait shop, a little glass front unit with dusty blinds and a vinyl walk-ins welcome sign taped to the door. I knocked gently before stepping in. She looked up from her desk, her silver reading glasses perched low on her nose. "Rhea Whitmore," she said, her smile spreading slowly. "Lord, it's been years." I smiled back. "I brought muffins. That's the kind of paperwork I like." We sat across from each other as she opened the box and pulled out a cinnamon crumble. She chewed thoughtfully. "So, what brings you by?" I pulled the envelope from my bag and placed it gently in front of her. "You notarized this for my mom last fall. I wanted to confirm it's legitimate." She adjusted her glasses, studying the paper. Then she nodded. "Yes, I remember this." She brought it in one chilly morning, said it wasn't a full will, but she wanted her intentions down in writing. She was very clear. No hesitation. "And it'll hold up as part of a contested estate, depends on the judge. But it's solid as a statement of intent, especially from someone in declining health." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Expecting trouble, I looked out the window. I think it's already circling. That night, Grant called again. I didn't answer. Instead, I stood on the front porch, watching the light fade behind the ridge. I could see the land stretching out our land. The southern slope where Mama used to plant zinnias. The old barn that had become my temporary workshop. The tiny, sagging chicken coop we hadn't used in 15 years. There was history in this soil, and a future if I fought for it. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Logan heard Grant wants to get an appraisal. "You okay with that?" I stared at the screen. Okay with it. Okay with them slicing up the place I had poured my savings and sweat into. Okay with being erased. No, but I didn't text back. In the weeks that followed, I worked. The house, though old, responded to care like it remembered being loved. I replaced rotted porch beams, rewired the front sconces, scrubbed years of mildew off the garden shed. The act of restoring it gave my days structure and my grief a place to settle. On Sundays, I'd visit Miss Della, our 80-year-old neighbor who used to make buttermilk pie and watch us when Mama was working double shifts at the school cafeteria. Della still remembered the house before we bought it when the Jeffersons lived there, back when the back field was full of horses. She shook her head when I told her Grant had asked about selling. "That boy always had dollar signs in his eyes," she said, sipping sweet tea. "But you were the one always fixing things, making things grow." I smiled softly. Mama said the same. Then, one afternoon, I returned home from the hardware store and noticed a white SUV in the driveway. Rental plates. Northern plates. I knew before I saw him. Grant. He stepped out, crisp polo shirt, expensive sunglasses, holding his phone like a weapon. "Rhea," he said with an easy grin. "Didn't think I'd catch you home." I didn't smile. He walked toward the house like he still owned it. "I've been talking to a couple of realtors. Market's strong. Could list in a week if we act fast." I leaned against the porch post, arms crossed. "I'm not selling." His expression didn't change, but his tone cooled. "We all have equal claim. You don't get to unilaterally decide. I have Mom's written statement, signed, notarized." He waved a hand. "A letter. That's not binding Rhea. It's sentimental. A real will from 2004 still stands, and it names all three of us." I felt my throat tighten. She changed her mind. "You weren't here. You didn't take care of her. You didn't lift a finger. I sent money. She didn't want your money. She wanted presents." Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, I get it. You're emotional. But we're talking about over $400, $1,000 in property value. Split 3 ways. That's a solid chunk for all of us. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "It's already hard," I said quietly. "And I'm not moving." His jaw tightened. He looked past me at the porch, the fields, the hills beyond. "You're wasting your time here, Rhea. We're not going to let you just keep it." Then he got in the car and drove away. I stood alone on the porch long after he'd gone. The sun dipped low. Cicadas hummed in the trees. I could still feel the pressure in my chest, the sick churn in my stomach. But I didn't cry. I walked back inside, folded the envelope again, and slid it back into the drawer beneath the tea towels under the linoleum liner, just as Mama had shown me. Only this time I added something else. I opened my laptop and began scanning every document I could find. Because Grant was right about one thing, this wasn't going to be easy, but it would be mine. They buried Mama on a gray Friday morning under a sky that couldn't decide whether to rain or just brood. The ceremony was short, quiet, the kind of service she would have wanted. No drama, no eulogies from people who barely knew her. Just a hymn she loved, a reading from Proverbs, and a breeze that stirred the cottonwoods as if she were passing through them one last time. I stood by the casket, my gloved hands clenched tightly around the bouquet of sage and lavender I'd picked from her garden that morning. Grant stood stiffly beside me in a pressed black suit, sunglasses on, even though the sun never came out. Logan was to his left, less polished tie, loose collar, wrinkled, but eyes wet. It was the most human I'd seen him in years. When the casket was lowered, I dropped the herbs in gently. "This land loved you," I whispered. And so did I. The reception was held at the local Grange Hall like every small-town funeral for the past 50 years. Casseroles lined the folding tables, potato salad, deviled eggs, banana pudding with Nilla wafers. Women in floral dresses asked how I was holding up, patted my arm, whispered condolences that all blurred together. I nodded, smiled where I had to. But my mind wasn't in that room, it was still in the drawer, with the envelope, the letter, and the weight of everything that was coming. Grant found me near the coat rack, standing beside a half-empty coffee urn. He set down his plate and cleared his throat like he was about to make a business pitch. "We should talk," he said. I didn't respond. He lowered his voice. "Look, I know this isn't the time or place, but the estate needs to be settled. We have to start thinking practically." There it was. Not, "How are you holding up?" Not, "Mom was proud of you. Just let's divide the spoils." "I already have," I said. "Mom left a signed letter with her wishes." "I know," he replied calmly. Too calmly. "I saw it. That's not a legal will. She intended it to be, but it's not binding." Logan stepped in, holding a cup of sweet tea. "Maybe now's not the moment. Actually, Grant cut in, it is, because I've already contacted an attorney." My stomach turned. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded packet of papers. Mom's 2004 will, still the most recent one filed legally. It splits all assets between the three of us. Evenly. I stared at the documents. "That was 18 years ago," I said, voice low. "Before I came back. Before I cared for her. Before I spent a dime restoring that house." "Intentions don't override documentation," Grant replied, "and we both know she never updated her will formally. That letter of yours sentimental? Sure, but it wouldn't stand up in probate court." He handed me the copy anyway, as if I'd thank him for the paperwork. "And what exactly," I asked, "are you proposing?" He straightened. "We sell. Split the proceeds 3 ways. It's the simplest solution." I glanced at Logan. He didn't meet my eyes. "Coward." "I'm not selling," I said. "I'm not leaving. This house, this land is not just property, it's history. It's sacrifice, it's mine. It's part of the estate," Grant snapped. "And unless you want to buy us both out, you don't get to just squat there and call it yours." "I'm not squatting. I'm honoring our mother." He didn't respond. Just picked up his plate again and walked back to the main hall like we'd been discussing stock prices instead of our childhood home. Later that night, I sat alone at the dining table, the copy of the 2004 will spread out in front of me like a threat. The wording was cold, generic, to be divided equally among her 3 children. No mention of my time here, no mention of the care, the labor, the oxygen tanks, the nights I sat by her bed while Grant sent holiday cards from his lake house in Maine and Logan forwarded memes with captions like, "Love ya mom." I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood in the doorway of the living room. The quilt she'd crocheted was still draped over the couch. Her cane leaned against the armrest. The curtains she'd hemmed by hand fluttered in the breeze. I could still feel her here, but Grant was right about one thing: her last official will didn't reflect the life she'd lived in her final years, and that gave him leverage. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Rhea. The voice on the other end was warm but cautious. "Hey, Mr. Dunleavy, I need a lawyer." Charles Dunleavy had handled Mama's affairs before title transfers, the occasional dispute with the county assessor. He wasn't flashy, but he was smart, local, fair. "I'm sorry about your mom," he said after a pause. "She was a good woman. She was the best." "What's going on?" I explained everything. The letter, the house, the will, Grant's threat to sell. When I was done, he exhaled. "You've got a case, Rhea. It won't be easy, but that notarized letter is evidence of her intent. Especially if you have witnesses' financial records proof of your time spent caregiving or restoring the property. I have receipts, I said. Photos, scans, permits, everything. Good, he said. Because if they're going to fight dirty, we're going to fight smart. The next morning, I walked through the house with a notepad. I documented everything. The hand-built trellis in the garden, the replaced flooring in the dining room, the invoice for the HVAC install I paid for out of pocket, everything I touched. I touched with purpose. If this was going to be a war, I wanted every nail accounted for. I pulled out old check stubs, bank transfers, screenshots of texts with Mama. "You don't have to fix that drain yourself, baby. Too late. Already fixed it." I emailed them all to Dunleavy, and then I scanned the letter again. High res, multiple copies. I even texted a copy to myself just in case. That night, as I closed the kitchen drawer, I caught my reflection in the window. Same tired eyes, same stubborn chin, but something else was there now, to resolve. I thought about Mama's words from weeks earlier. If you lose that paper, check the wall. I hadn't understood it then, but now it lingered. The drawer had been the first layer. What if there was more? I stared at the old oak paneling by the pantry wood that hadn't been repainted since the Reagan administration. Something about it looked different, slightly bowed, like it had been opened before. I reached for a flashlight and got down on my knees, ran my fingers along the grain, tapped gently, hollow. My heart picked up speed. I pressed harder. The panel shifted. A seam appeared. And just as I leaned in, the power flickered. Darkness fell, and I realized this wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about truth, and someone had gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. The flashlight beam quivered as I pried gently at the seam in the oak paneling. The wood gave way with a quiet pop. Behind it was a shallow cavity, dusty and padded with old insulation. Nestled inside sat a wooden box no larger than a shoebox, wrapped in wax paper and tied with twine. My heart pounded as I pulled it out and carried it to the kitchen table. Before I could open it, the front door slammed. I froze. Footsteps, heavy and familiar, echoed down the hall. Rhea Grant's voice rang out like he'd just walked into his own house. I shoved the box back into the wall and sealed the panel with shaking hands. My breath caught in my throat as he entered the kitchen holding a set of unfamiliar keys. "Where did you get those?" I asked. "Logan," he replied casually. "Mom gave him a set a while back. He mailed them to me last week. Figured it made sense since I'm handling most of the estate now." "This isn't your office," I said tightly. "It's my home. Correction, our home. At least until probate's settled." He dropped a folder onto the table like a man pitching a deal. "I've scheduled an official appraisal. Tuesday, 9 a.m. You don't have the right. It's standard procedure," he replied, voice even. "We need to know the value for probate unless you're planning to buy us both out." "I'm not selling," I said firmly. He didn't flinch. Then we moved forward. The erosion had begun. That weekend, strangers began showing up. The appraiser with a clipboard and camera snapped photos like the place had already been listed. A realtor smiled too much and complimented the crown molding I had installed with my own hands. A landscape assessor poked through the back field while I stood on the porch, teeth clenched. I called Charlie Dunleavy. "This isn't legal," I told him. "It's not illegal either," he replied. "Until the court resolves ownership, your brothers have the right to assess value, but you can deny access to private areas. Just document everything and don't let them intimidate you." On Monday, I went to move my laundry from the dryer and found it dumped still damp in a basket in the garage. On top sat a note in Grant's handwriting, "Used the dryer for bedding. Realtor staging." Staging. I charged back into the house already seething. The living room had been rearranged. My framed photos were stacked by the door. The books I'd alphabetized had been replaced with color-coordinated hardbacks. A vase of fake tulips now sat in the center of Mama's old dining table. Grant walked down the hall like he hadn't just committed a violation. "Don't touch my things," I snapped. "It's temporary," he said. "Neutral staging helps listings pop. You can put your stuff back later." "This isn't a listing," I said. "This house isn't for sale. You're making this harder than it has to be, and you're invading my space." He chuckled, sharp and dismissive. "You've been squatting in our mother's house for 3 years. You don't own it." I stepped toward him. "Say that again." But he didn't. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with one of Mama's old quilts wrapped around me, sipping cold tea and listening to the creak of the wind chimes. The house felt different now, like someone else's hands had started rewriting its story. Caretaker becomes squatter. Restorer becomes obstacle. I opened the drawer to check on Mama's letter, still there, still signed, still notarized. Then I pressed my hand against the hidden wall panel. The box was still tucked inside. Not yet, I told myself. Wait until the moment is right. Wednesday. Logan showed up without warning, a canvas grocery bag in hand, like he was dropping in for coffee. "You could have called," I said flatly. "Didn't want to get sent to voicemail," he replied. I let him inside. He looked around. "Place looks different. That's because your brother staged it like a rental property," I muttered. He exhaled. "He means well. He's just efficient. He's erasing her Logan. One lamp, one photo at a time." He leaned against the fridge. "I don't want a war." "Then why are you letting him start one?" He hesitated. "I can't afford a fight. I've got 2 kids, a mortgage, and daycare that costs more than rent. I need my share. That's all. You weren't here when she couldn't walk. You weren't the one dressing her wounds, holding her hand, helping her remember her name. You didn't earn anything. I just need my part," he said quietly. "You didn't earn it," I repeated. He left without another word. The next morning, I woke to hammering. Men were unloading lumber from a flatbed truck in my driveway. One of them held a clipboard and said they'd been hired to reinforce the deck per the property manager's orders. "And who's the property manager?" I asked, though I already knew. "Grant," the man replied. I called the sheriff. Deputy Maria Salazar arrived not long after. She was sharp-eyed and calm, someone I vaguely remembered from high school, a girl who always got the last word. I explained everything. She listened closely, then said, "Do you have documentation proving sole ownership?" "Not formally, but I have a notarized letter. The case is pending." She nodded. "Then you're within your rights to tell them to leave. This won't stop them, but it'll slow things down." She turned to the crew. "Pack it up, fellas. Come back with a court order." After the truck pulled away, she faced me again. "He's trying to push you out emotionally before he does it legally." I nodded. "He's getting close." "You gonna let him?" I paused. "No. I haven't shown my hand yet." That night, I returned to the wall panel. I pulled out the box and opened it. Inside was the thing I hadn't let myself hope for, a handwritten update to the will signed and notarized by Marlene DeWitt. It named me and only me as the sole inheritor of the house and property. Beside it lay a letter in Mama's familiar script. "If you're reading this, it means the boys are doing what I feared. Don't let them gaslight you. Don't let them take what you've built. You've already earned it, Rhea. Now, prove it." The tears came then. Not from sadness, but from rage and release. This changed everything. I took a deep breath, wiped my face, and reached for my phone. Because I was done waiting, and in the next chapter of this fight, I wouldn't just defend what was mine, I'd strike. By dawn, I had scanned the updated will, 3 times made backup copies on 2 hard drives, emailed it to Charlie Dunleavy, and printed 3 color versions. One went into my fireproof lockbox, one into a folder labeled court, and the third I tucked into my purse so I could feel its weight when I needed it. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The adrenaline kept me sharp. At 9 sharp, I was on a video call with Charlie. He reviewed the updated will on screen, nodding slowly, adjusting his reading glasses. His voice was even, but I saw the change in his posture. "Well," he said, "this changes everything." He walked me through the next steps, filing a formal contestation of the 2004 will, submitting the updated one as her final testament, petitioning the court for a stay on all actions involving the property until ownership was determined. He'd handled estate disputes before, but he said this one would be personal. Because he'd known my mother. He'd eaten her rhubarb pie. He'd watched me ride my bike barefoot around the courthouse fountain when I was 9. We filed the petition that same day. The following morning, I posted a sign on the front gate, private property. No trespassing. Legal matter pending. I printed copies of the updated will and handed them to both Grant and Logan via certified mail. And then, for the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. But peace didn't last long. 2 days later, I was returning from the post office when I noticed something strange. The lock on the barn had been cut. The door hung open slightly. I parked fast and approached slowly. The space smelled like dust and paint and cold metal. My tools were there, still arranged where I'd left them, but something was off. The storage cabinet I kept sealed. The one with Mama's documents repair receipts, the timeline of the renovations had been opened. Papers were scattered on the workbench. One envelope was torn. My stomach twisted. I backed out of the barn, heart racing, and called Charlie again. "Do I have legal recourse if they're going through my things?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. That's private property. Even if ownership is still contested, your personal effects are not up for grabs. We can issue a cease and desist today." An hour later, the papers were served. Grant didn't take it well. That night, I heard banging at the front door. I opened it cautiously to find him standing there, suit jacket, rumpled tie askew, holding a manila envelope in one hand and a beer can in the other. "You just couldn't let it go, could you?" he said. "I followed the law. Something you forgot to do. You filed a cease and desist like I'm some criminal. You trespassed. You broke a lock. You went through things that didn't belong to you. They belong to the family," he said sharply. "Everything in that house, in that barn, on that land, it's ours, not anymore." He threw the envelope at my feet. "Fine. You want war? You've got it." He turned and left tires screeching as he pulled out of the gravel drive. I stared at the envelope, picked it up, slid it open. Inside was a notice. Petition to remove occupant. Temporary injunction request. Claim of unauthorized use of estate property. He was trying to evict me. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity, the desperation, the sheer arrogance. Then I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat down. They were serious, so I had to be too. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. In that time, Charlie and I compiled everything: financial records, photo documentation, digital blueprints, text threads with Mama, and a notarized letter from Marlene confirming she had witnessed the updated will. We even had statements from neighbors Miss Della, the Perkins couple next door, who'd seen me restore the house, care for Mama, and live there full-time for 3 years. We were ready, but then just 3 days before the hearing, I got a message from a name I hadn't seen in over a decade. Eleanor's Notary Archive. Cloud alert change detected. I opened it, confused. It was a digital document log linked to Mama's old password-protected Dropbox, something I hadn't realized still existed. When I clicked in, I saw dozens of scans she'd uploaded in her final year. Medical records, insurance papers, grocery lists. And then I found it. A conversation thread between her and Logan. It started innocently. "Let me know how the meds are working." Then Grant said you should consider naming him executor. It would save a lot of time. Later, "Don't tell Rhea yet, she's too emotional about the house." And finally, the gut punch. "Once it's sold, we can take care of her. Maybe a small trust." They hadn't just been pushing back against my claim, they'd been planning it before she died. I sat frozen for a long time, staring at the screen. Betrayal is a strange feeling. It doesn't stab, it seeps, like water under a door, rising slow until your feet are soaked and cold and you realize you were never safe. I didn't tell Charlie about the emails right away. I needed time to feel everything, to grieve her again. Because in that moment, I realized something worse than being challenged. I'd been pitied, and not the kind of pity that comes from kindness, the kind that assumes you'll never be strong enough to fight back. The morning of the hearing, I wore black, not for mourning, but for clarity. The courtroom was small, a converted municipal space with buzzing lights and uncomfortable chairs. Grant showed up in a tailored blazer full of smugness. Logan came alone, hair combed but eyes red. Whether from guilt or exhaustion, I didn't know. Charlie stood beside me at the front, calm, sharp, grounded. When the judge asked for opening remarks, Grant's lawyer leaned into the microphone and called me a temporary occupant and emotionally motivated individual with no legal claim of ownership and a squatter acting against the interests of the family. Charlie stood, slowly adjusted his tie, and delivered a quiet rebuttal that landed like steel. She is not a squatter. She is the only person who remained, the only person who cared for her mother, the only person who invested in that property not for profit, but for preservation. And she has the documents, photos, witnesses, and notarized will to prove it. The judge took it all in, nodded, and called a recess. As we stepped into the hallway, Grant walked past me without a glance. Logan hesitated. He opened his mouth to say something, but didn't. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me a flash drive. "What's this?" I asked. "It's everything," he said quietly. "Emails, documents, my side of the story." And then he walked away. I didn't open it yet. Not that day, but I held it in my hand the whole ride home, thinking about all the truths we hide in folders and drives and walls, and how much damage they do when they surface all at once. The court would deliver its ruling within the week, but in my heart I already knew what came next. Because what they tried to do wasn't just steal my home, they tried to rewrite who I was in that story. The courthouse called on a Thursday afternoon. I missed the call by 3 minutes, but saw the voicemail notification and didn't wait to listen. I called Charlie directly. He picked up on the second ring. "It's good news," he said, voice tight with emotion. The judge accepted the 20-22 will as the decedent's final testament. "You've been granted sole ownership of the house and property. The 2004 will is superseded." I sat down on the steps of the front porch. The wood was still warm from the sun. I let the weight of his words settle. "You won, Rhea," he said. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My hands trembled. My eyes stung. Not from joy, not exactly. The feeling was deeper, more complicated. I wasn't celebrating. I was exhaling after holding my breath for months. "Thank you," I said, finally. "Truly. There's more," Charlie added. The judge also barred any future claims from being filed on the property. "It's over, Rhea. Legally and finally." I ended the call and just sat there watching the wind move through the tall grass. The house felt still for the first time in weeks, like it too had been waiting for the verdict. And it wasn't until I went back inside that I saw what was waiting for me on the kitchen table. A yellow envelope, unmarked. No postmark, no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. Me, Mama, and the house taken 2 summers ago. I remembered the day. We'd painted the shutters that morning, and she'd laughed at how I got paint on my nose. On the back in neat handwriting were just 5 words. "You already proved it. M." I don't know how it got there. I didn't ask. For the next few days, I worked in silence. I moved my tools back into the barn, took down the "for sale" sign someone had planted again by the road, threw it into the burn barrel and lit it myself. Then I went room by room, undoing the staging. I returned every photo to its place, put Mama's quilt back on the couch, moved the tulips to the compost pile, and replaced them with a vase of clippings from her garden sage rosemary and a single marigold. I scrubbed the baseboards, polished the floor, cleaned the house from top to bottom, not because it was dirty, but because I wanted it to breathe again. That Sunday, Miss Della from next door came by with a pie and a smile. "Saw the court report in the paper?" she said, voice low but pleased. "Told Earl you'd win." I hugged her longer than I meant to. "You remind me of your mother more every day," she said as she left. Stubborn and full of steel. The following week, I finally plugged in the flash drive Logan had handed me outside the courtroom. I wasn't sure what I expected. What I found was a folder titled, "If You Ever Read This." Inside were scanned emails, draft letters, a few audio clips. In one, Logan spoke softly into the recorder. His voice broke halfway through. "I don't know how to fix it," he said. "Grant wanted to move fast, and I let him. I figured it was just money, that you'd come around, that we could split it, and maybe you'd get some freedom after all that time. But now I see, we took what mattered most. Not the house, not the land, but the years, the care. He paused. You were right, Rhea. And I'm sorry. I closed the file and stared at the screen. It didn't undo the past, but it mattered. That evening, I stood in front of the wall again. The panel Mama had pointed to weeks before her death. If you lose that paper, she'd said check the wall. But it wasn't just one hiding place. It was several. Curiosity tugged at me, and this time, I checked the panel to the right. Same age, same wood. I tapped gently, hollow. I pulled at the seam. Inside was a smaller tin box rusted at the corners. I pried it open slowly. Inside were 5 envelopes, one for me, one for Logan, one for Grant, one labeled sheriff if needed, and one with nothing on it but a single word proof. I opened mine first. Rhea. The letter began. If you're reading this, then I've passed and things have gone the way I feared. I hope I'm wrong, but just in case. I want you to know I never doubted your heart. Not for a second. You were the one who stayed, the one who built, the one who held me together. Don't let them steal what's yours not because of money, but because it's the only way to stop this from repeating in another generation. Tears blurred the rest of the letter. I left Logan's unopened. Grant's too, they'd get them in time. But that last envelope proof called to me differently. Inside were photographs, receipts. A signed document from her old doctor confirming her diagnosis and mental capacity at the time the will was updated. All of it. Insurance. Mama had known this fight would come. She'd planned for it. She didn't just trust me, she armed me. I sat on the floor of the pantry for a long time, back against the cool wall, everything spread around me. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was defending anything. I felt like I was building something again. The next morning, I called the county clerk. I'd like to refile the deed, I said. Sure thing. Name on the title, Rhea Whitmore, I said. Sole owner, and just like that, it became official. Not in spirit, not in intent, but in ink. That weekend, I hosted a small gathering at the house, just a few neighbors, Miss Della, the Perkins, a couple of the women from Mama's old quilting group. We sat on the porch and drank lemonade, talked about the heat, the summer tomatoes, the history of Sweetwater Ridge. I told them I planned to host a harvest dinner in the fall, just like Mama used to. No RSVPs needed, I said. Just bring what you've got. Stories, too. When the sun dipped behind the oak trees, I stood in the kitchen, alone for a moment, and looked around. The room smelled like basil and old floor wax, and peace. But I knew this wasn't the end, because something else was coming. I could feel it. Not a storm, but a reckoning. And I would be ready. It started with a box in the attic. I wasn't searching for anything that morning, just clearing out what was left. Mama's sewing baskets, some brittle newspaper clippings, a broken floor fan, the kind of things you can't throw out without a little guilt and a lot of dust. Then I saw it wedged behind a rafter beam. Small square made of dark wood with brass corners. It looked out of place among the cardboard and plastic. Older, heavier. I pulled it free and sat cross-legged in the attic's golden light, brushing off a layer of grime like unearthing some sacred artifact. Inside were ledgers, envelopes, and a stack of yellowed legal documents. At first I thought it was old tax stuff. Then I saw the date, 1971. The name at the top, Ruth Whitmore, Mama's mother. The ledgers weren't just numbers, they were maps, a trail of purchases, land transfers, loans taken and repaid in secret. There was a deed from 1973 with a name crossed out in pencil and held in trust for daughter until majority scrawled beneath it. Mama hadn't just inherited the house. She'd been denied it, for years, by her own father. The story she'd never told about why she stopped speaking to her older brother started to take shape in these crumbling pages. He'd sold off half the southern acreage to cover a gambling debt, forged a signature, moved to Arkansas when the truth caught up to him. The women in our family had always been left to clean up what the men broke. And now I understood why Mama had fought so hard to protect the land, why she hid documents in walls, why she prepared for a war she wouldn't live to see, because she'd already fought her own, and she didn't want me repeating it. I laid the papers out across the kitchen table like a crime board, stared at names I didn't recognize. There were letters from lawyers, receipts from cash withdrawals, even a photograph of a woman with eyes like mine and a baby on her hip. Ruth holding Mama standing in front of this very porch in 1955. Then, at the very bottom of the box was a small sealed envelope with my name on it. Not Rhea, not Honey, not baby girl, just to my daughter. My fingers trembled as I opened it. If you're reading this, it means the house has survived another man trying to own what he never built. You will think this is about land, but it never is. It's about legacy, about voice, about memory. My daddy taught me that, and so did his silence when I asked why he left Mama off the deed. Your brothers are not evil. They are afraid of women who don't ask for permission, of sisters who don't stay small, of daughters who inherit the truth. But you, Rhea, you are not small, so don't let this end with court papers. Make it bigger than that. Tell the story. Speak our names. Make them remember we were here, that we held this place, that it was ours not because we were given it, but because we kept it. Trial by blood is cruel, but it reveals who's worthy to stand. Stand, Rhea, and do not flinch. I cried then, not from sadness, but from the deep ancestral roar of recognition. I was part of something older, fiercer, something earned, and I would not flinch. 3 days later, I called Logan. He answered after the second ring. I need to see you, I said. Here, at the house. Just you. He paused. Is this about the flash drive? It's about the family. He came the next morning wearing a windbreaker and sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. He looked tired, like sleep had stopped coming easy. I didn't offer him coffee, just led him to the table where the documents were laid out. He scanned the papers. His face changed. Where did you get all this? Attic. Behind the rafter. He picked up the 1973 deed. I didn't know about any of this. I believe you, I said. That's why you're here? He looked up. And Grant? He's not ready for truth? Not yet. Logan sat down. What do you want from me, Rhea? I looked him square in the eyes. I want you to help me tell the story. He blinked. Like, to the family. No, I said. To the world. That night, I opened Mama's old laptop, the one I'd barely touched. Inside, I found a folder titled Echoes. It was filled with journal entries, photos, voice recordings from the early 2000s. Mama had documented everything, her repairs, her fears, her dreams. There was even a scanned sketch of what she once wanted the house to become, a women's retreat, a place for healing, for inheritance, not of money, but of memory. And I knew then, sitting at that cracked kitchen counter, that I would finish what she started. Not just protect the house, transform it. Logan helped quietly. He brought a scanner, organized the files, reached out to cousins we hadn't heard from in years. Slowly, we built a timeline, not just of the house, but of the women. Ruth, Caroline, Evelyn, and now, Rhea. We created a website, a digital archive, a living document that told the story from the inside out. Grant didn't respond when we invited him to view it, but I knew he saw. He'd never apologize. But I didn't need him to, because the world was starting to listen. The first person to reach out was an independent journalist from Austin, then a podcast producer from Georgia, then a women's history collective in Vermont. They saw the story for what it was, a micro-history of land inheritance, and the way women have been quietly holding the country together, 1 acre at a time. One night, sitting on the porch with my laptop on my knees, I got an email I'll never forget. Subject line. For the exhibit, the Smithsonian. They were building an installation on female land ownership in post-war America. They wanted to feature Mama's archive. They wanted us. I walked through the house that night barefoot like I did as a girl. The floor was warm, the wall silent but pulsing alive. I ran my hand along the doorway where Mama used to measure my height in pencil marks. Along the banister she'd refinished during chemo, refusing to let the cancer dull her hands. And I whispered, "We made it, Mama. You and me." No one answered, but the wind shifted, and I swear to God I smelled cinnamon. I thought it was over then. That peace had finally arrived. But stories don't just end, especially not the ones buried in walls. And when the last unopened envelope surfaced, one final twist I hadn't seen coming, it reminded me that even truth has layers. Even legacy has secrets. The first hammer swing didn't echo. It rang, clean and purposeful like the sound the land had been waiting for. I stood in the middle of the old barn, sunlight pouring through the slats like stripes on a cathedral floor, and swung again this time into the plywood divider Grant had put up when he tried to turn the space into a rental office. It splintered fast. Good. Logan showed up an hour later with 2 toolboxes, a 5-gallon bucket of paint, and 3 thermoses of black coffee. He didn't say much, just handed me a sander and got to work on the wall. By sunset, the divider was gone. The floor was swept, and the old beams finally saw air again. I stood at the threshold, covered in dust and sweat, and stared at what was left. It wasn't just a barn anymore. It was becoming something. I spent the next month turning the space into what Mama would have called a woman's room of her own. But it was bigger than that. I tore out the rotted shelves and replaced them with floor-to-ceiling windows from the old feed store, added a wood stove in the back corner, painted the walls a warm clay color that matched the earth outside after spring rain. We laid fresh planks, rewired the lights, built a long wooden table in the center from reclaimed oak, wide enough for writing workshops or quilting circles or silent coffee at dawn. And I gave it a name, Second Hearth. The name came to me in the garden one morning when I was weeding by the marigolds and felt that familiar pull in my chest, not grief anymore, but memory settling into place. The first hearth was the home we're born into, the one that raises us, shapes us, sometimes breaks us. The second hearth is the one we choose, the one we build brick by stubborn brick after the smoke has cleared and the ashes have cooled. This place would be for women like me, caregivers who were never thanked, daughters erased from wills and photos, sisters left out of speeches, women who stayed too long, or left too late, or came back to nothing but a set of broken hinges and an old casserole dish that no one claimed. They would come here to rest, to repair, to remember, and maybe eventually to rise. The first guest arrived on a rainy Friday in November. Her name was Marisol, 49, recently divorced and trying to reconnect with a daughter who no longer spoke to her. She brought a duffel bag, a journal, and a box of photographs she wasn't ready to open yet. I didn't offer her advice, just a mug of coffee, a blanket, and the seat by the east window. Later, we sat at the big oak table and I told her my story, not like a speech, not as some triumphant how I won tale, but simply truthfully. I built the house, I said. Then I almost lost it. But the worst part wasn't the house, it was the feeling that I didn't matter. That everything I'd done, every nail, every month of care could be erased if the paperwork didn't favor me. She nodded, not just with sympathy, but with recognition. That's how they get you, she said. They convince you love doesn't count unless it's documented. We didn't need to say more. Some silences are sacred. The weeks passed and Second Hearth grew. More women came. A school nurse from Kansas, a retired firefighter from Tulsa, a young woman who'd spent 10 years caring for a grandmother who died and left everything to a neighbor. They didn't come for therapy. They came to breathe. They left poems on the table, baked bread, cleaned the tools without being asked. One of them hung a dream catcher above the front window, and I left it there, even though Mama always said dream catchers belonged in bedrooms. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was about making room. Logan kept showing up, sometimes with lumber, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but time. We didn't talk about the past much anymore. We just worked. One day, after sanding the last bench in the reading corner, he looked over and said, "You think she'd be proud?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I think she'd be surprised, and I think she'd laugh, and I think she'd plant tomatoes out front and pretend none of this was a big deal." He chuckled. "Yeah, that sounds like her." We didn't say more. We didn't need to. Forgiveness isn't a banner or a finish line. It's 1,000 quiet choices, and I was still making mine day by day. On the first snow, I lit the stove for the season. It took a while to catch, but once it did, The warmth crawled up through the floorboards and settled in my bones like something ancient. I hung a photo above the hearth, Mama in her denim apron holding a basket of green beans, smiling like she had a secret. Beneath it, in letters carved by hand, she never left. She just changed form. The barn smelled like wood smoke and rosemary. Laughter echoed from the back table where 3 women were folding paper cranes. Outside, the frost clung to the windows, but inside it was spring. We had made something. Not perfect, but whole. And that was enough, because I had found my second hearth, and I would spend the rest of my life helping others find theirs. The box was plain, just a brown weather-faded package tucked behind the porch swing early one evening. I almost didn't notice it, my hands full with firewood, my mind on dinner. But something about the way it sat there, still and intentional, made me pause. No label, no return address. When I opened it, I recognized it immediately. Mama's old hard drive, the one she'd kept tucked behind a stack of cookbooks in the kitchen cupboard. The one that mysteriously disappeared after her death. The one I searched for and eventually gave up on, half expecting, half hoping it would find its way back. And now, quietly without ceremony, it had. No note, no handwriting. But I knew who left it. Grant. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stood on the porch as the sun bled out behind the trees, holding the hard drive in my hands, my thumbs brushing over the familiar scratches by the USB port. He didn't come to the door, didn't knock, didn't stay, but he came, and he gave something back. That was more than I thought he ever would. A week later, I decided to host a dinner. Not an open house or a statement, just a small meal with a few people who had once been family in the blood sense, and maybe if the stars aligned could become family in the truer sense. I cooked all afternoon, roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, roasted squash with maple glaze, cornbread from Mama's recipe card, the one she never measured but always perfected. I set the long oak table at second hearth with simple linen runners and mismatched plates that used to sit in Mama's china hutch. Logan came early to help set chairs. Amanda arrived 10 minutes later, stepping out of the car a little hesitantly, smoothing down her coat like she wasn't sure if she belonged. I opened the door before she could knock. She looked at me. I looked at her. Then she said, "This smells incredible." I smiled. "It's Mama's rosemary. She planted it by the fence in '97. It's still holding on." Amanda nodded and stepped inside. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was the first time she'd been back in this space since the legal battle began. And that, in itself, was something close to grace. During the meal, the conversation stayed light. Someone asked Logan about his job. He'd gone freelance as a carpenter doing custom woodwork, now part-time. Amanda mentioned her new role at a small architecture firm, and I spoke a little about Second Hearth, careful not to turn it into a speech. But somewhere between dessert and tea, Amanda surprised us all. "You know," she said, resting her mug in her hands, "when Logan first told me about everything that happened here, I'll admit I didn't understand why it mattered so much. I thought it was just a house. Some land, but it's more than that, isn't it?" Everyone was quiet. She turned to me. "You built something. With your hands, with your grief, with your truth. And it stood." I didn't know what to say. I just held her gaze. "Thank you," I said finally. She nodded. "No one ever built something like this for me. But I'm glad it exists. For all of us." After the table was cleared and the kettle was cooling, Logan asked if we could step out onto the porch for a minute. I followed him out into the crisp air, the sky overhead soft with stars. "I've been thinking about something," he said. I leaned against the railing, waiting. "We're expecting?" he added almost shyly. I looked at him, really looked, and then saw it, the glow in his face, the way his shoulders seemed lighter. "Amanda and we're due in February." A rush of warmth moved through my chest. "Congratulations," I said with all the sincerity in the world. He looked down, then back at me. "We were wondering if you might help us design the nursery." I blinked. "You want me to—" "I want my kid to know where they come from," he interrupted. "And I want them to grow up around someone who doesn't quit, someone who built something from ashes, someone who doesn't flinch." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I stepped forward and hugged him. Not tight, not desperate, Just enough. I'd be honored, I said into his shoulder. After they left, I cleaned the kitchen slowly, savoring the silence. The chairs pushed in, the candle wax dripped, the last echoes of laughter still humming off the beams. Then I made myself a cup of tea and walked out to the porch. Mama's old shawl wrapped around my shoulders. The wind was soft that night, curling around the columns, rustling the trees. The stars blinked lazily above the ridge. Somewhere in the barn, the old wind chime whispered against the doorframe. I sat in the rocker feet, bare against the wood, and held the warm mug against my chest. And I thought about everything we inherit. Some people get land, some get trust funds, some get nothing at all but a name they don't want and a lifetime of silence. But I'd inherited something different. Not because Mama left it to me, but because I refused to let them take it. I inherited the courage to fight for what's mine and the wisdom to know I'm worth it. That was the truest legacy, and I'd carry it forward like fire.